Every Wednesday, William Henry's Revelations bring you a powerful half hour of information at the cutting edge of reality. Information that you cannot find anywhere else in the world. And now, here's William.
Welcome, everyone. Scholars and seekers of the truth about Jesus are abuzz questioning the authenticity and significance of a much-publicized discovery by a Harvard scholar who reported that a 4th century fragment of a papyrus has provided the first evidence that some early Christians believed Jesus was married. In the fragmentary text, Jesus refers unmistakably to my wife. Another line reads, "She will be able to be my disciple." This seems to be a clear reference to Mary Magdalene. Karen King, a professor at Harvard Divinity School, announced the finding Tuesday, September 18, 2012, at an international congress on Coptic studies in Rome. Her paper and the front page attention it received in the New York Times is very much a topic among more than just Dan Brown fans. It has serious implications in Christianity. Dr. King's paper will appear in the January 2013 issue of the Harvard Theological Review. In an interview, King emphasized that this new discovery does not prove that the historical Jesus was married, as popularized by Dan Brown in the Da Vinci Code. King is an outspoken critic of Brown and his 85 million copy selling Holy Blood, Holy Grail inspired book and disagrees with the married Jesus theory. That would go against church doctrine. So for her to step forward with this papyrus is interesting to say the least. She practically comes unglued protesting Jesus' nuptials. King presented the document at a 6-day conference being held at Rome's La Sapienza University and at the Augustinium Institute of the Pontifical Lateran University. And while the Vatican newspaper and Vatican radio frequently cover such academic conferences, there was no mention of King's discovery in any Vatican media yet. The fragment belongs to an anonymous private collector who contacted King to help translate and analyze it. Nothing is known about the circumstances of its discovery, but it had to come out of Egypt, where the dry climate allows ancient writings to survive, and because it was written in a script used in ancient times in Egypt, King said. Eminent scholars have come forward to verify the papyrus, the printing, the grammar, and the syntax. If true, the Jesus was married theory is potentially amazing and damaging to Christianity at the same time. Last week, it was Muhammad as a gay child abuser. This week, Jesus is married. What's going on? Here today to talk about the wife of Jesus theory and more is Tricia McCannon. Tricia is the author of Jesus, the Explosive Story of the 30 Lost Years and Ancient Mystery Religions. This is one of my wife Claire's favorite books about Jesus. Tricia's website, TriciaMcCannonSpeaks.com, is loaded with information about her book as well as her other investigations. I just caught her on her way out the door today to speak at the 2012 Star Knowledge Conference in Hendersonville, North Carolina, so we're very pleased to speak with Tricia today. Tricia, welcome to Revelations.
Oh, William, it's a pleasure. I'm so glad that we could work it out, and this is indeed an incredible discovery.
We're taking another look at Jesus, especially the question, was he married? Why is this such an important question, Tricia?
You know, I think it's a very interesting thing because traditionally what we have been taught within the church, and of course the church for many years until the time of the Martin Luther and the Lutheran Reformation, the church was simply Catholicism. And for a long time, ministers and priests of Jesus were actually allowed to be married and to have children and to have their own homes. And that, of course, was abolished by the Catholic Church because they found that when those ministers died, they wound up leaving their worldly goods to their wives and families, as you would expect.
That's not good from the Church's perspective.
From the Church's perspective, they were really interested in amassing power and money for many, many centuries and really dominating world religion.
So, Tricia, are you saying celibate and single Jesus is more of a financial question than it is a spiritual question?
Well, I think that certainly if the master that you're following taught a path that said you have to be celibate and single, or which he didn't, or portrayed a lifetime in which you were celibate and single, it would tend to reinforce the idea that by following the master, you would follow in his footsteps at a domestic level as well as a spiritual one. So I think that there was an acquisition of power and money that took place, and unfortunately, it didn't really serve the human beings that really sought to follow the path of spirituality and Jesus, as we can tell from some of the crazy things that have come to light in the last 10 or 20 years around men who had dedicated their lives to Christianity and to the church, and yet their own human natures, which include a sexual nature, really needed some kind of an expression. And if you don't have a healthy expression with a wife and a partner, then you might wind up with an unhealthy one, which is unfortunately what we've seen that has come to light in the last 10, 20 years.
The pedophiles. I heard a pundit on CBS News say that this papyrus, that Jesus is married theory, if true, and I believe it's true, will fuel the debate about marriage in general. What is marriage? Is it between a man and a woman? How do we define marriage? I think that could be a bit of a stretch linking it to that argument. The bigger question to me seems to be the question they did not raise on any of the websites or the news programs that I've seen that have referenced this article. If Jesus is married, then the next question for me is, did Jesus and Mary Magdalene have sex? And if so, did they somehow engage in sacred sex and perhaps open gateways to other dimensions through their sacred marriage?
Well, this is, again, a very big conversation. I want to remind our listeners that in the Jewish teachings, one was not even allowed to become a rabbi unless you were married. And the reason for that is because they understood that we have a physical nature, which includes a sexual, an emotional, a mental, and a spiritual nature. And how can you attain mastery if you have not addressed and balanced all of those natures? And so within the Jewish teachings at the time of Jesus, in order to have been proclaimed a rabbi, which he was, would have had to have been married. This was simple Jewish law.
No way around that one.
Well, they just didn't want their holy men out there philandering with a whole bunch of women. And so this was a way of solving it. Pick one woman, make a commitment, and, as many an intelligent, wise master has discovered, and we see this in the works, for example, of Yogananda. Yogananda's direct teacher was Sri Yukiswa, who was a householder and married, and his master, Babaji, was not. And Yogananda once said to Sri Yukiswa, which way should I go? And Sri Yukiswa said, both paths are worthy, both paths are spiritual. If you're celibate, of course, you give up this whole emotional and sexual component that is part of the sacred alchemy that allows us to, if you're with a healthy partner and it's a healthy relationship, to work on ourselves and to achieve a level of spiritual union and oneness. If you choose a path as a householder, of course, you may be a master to all your students, but your wife may still ask you to pick the clothes up off the floor or do the laundry. So, they have their pluses and their minuses. But, when you bring up the whole idea of the hierogamos or the sacred marriage, there were many levels to this. At the physical level, it is the idea that we can love someone enough that we stop being selfish. We open our hearts, we fall in love with that person with all their beautiful divinity and all of their very human imperfections.
That's like, do they call that agape love in the Greek tradition?
In fact, that is the name for it, is agape love. And of course, there is also eros, which is the sexual love. And you can have both. And that's sort of the best of all worlds, is when you pick someone who is also working on their own spiritual alignment and a refinement process, you get an opportunity to grow together. And that means you wind up not always being selfish. It's not always about you. It's really about loving something beyond yourself. And really and truly, who we're loving is the divine, because the divine flows through each of us like a stained glass window. And that window is unique to every individual. But the divine resides within us, and through holding your wife or your husband in the way of an expression, let us say, of the divine feminine or the divine masculine, it allows them to grow into that space. the love itself literally reveals all of the shadows, and they get dissolved in the light of love. And this is really the higher path.